Political education. It is a very important topic. How can we effectively educate people on matters of politics? What are the problems? What do we need to look at when doing that? My name is Emil Schenturk, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about these very important questions. So let's get right into it. In every political system, but especially with the emergence or re-emergence of democratic state systems, the topic of political education and political activism actually popped up or is increasingly one of the aspects that kind of accompany our political life and also societal life. People in their private time engage with politics. They study political phenomena, they discuss it. Some take more formal routes and try to educate themselves in courses or universities, academia. At school, we get, in most systems in most countries, we get the basic idea of how the system of the country works and what are the basic elements of politics in that country, basically. So there is a lot of contact, and there is a heightened interest in knowing political processes, principles, and also values, and on the content level, learning about these things is very prominent. Obviously, this podcast is trying to add to it by providing another source of political education, actually. And this is why I think it is important to reflect on that a little bit and think what it actually means. Well, there are two different schools that deal with this topic of political education, or two broader streams of thinking. The first, obviously, is in favor of political education, saying that civil society needs to engage with methods that are important to the public and need to have a say in it, or at least be informed. And in the most basic sense, if you are living in a democratic system, you are able to cast a vote after a certain age and under certain conditions. And in order to do that effectively, you obviously need to be informed. If you are not informed enough about what is going on in the country and how the political system works, you're not able to make a sound voting decision. And here, this stream of thought argues that we have flawed policymaking and flawed democratic systems because people are not educated enough about certain things that are going on in their country. And I totally agree with that, because this is also something that I pointed out in my book. It's called DEVLET, and as always, the links are down below. So if you want to order it, it is globally available also in other bookstores. So I highly recommend it, because the voting system and the aspect of political education there is very prominently explained, and an integral part, basically, of how politics is done. And in this stream of thought that people need to engage with political content, there are different kind of ways to approach it. Political parties, for example, are very keen on educating their party members and try to also attract new party members and educate them. I think this is one of the most dangerous ways to educate people on politics, and I don't think that this is education at all, or education in a negative sense, I would say, because parties inherently look from their organizational perspective onto politics. And because of that, they obviously tend to explain politics in certain rigid terms that they found to be right, which cannot actually factually and objectively be right in all policy situations. So there's no blueprint to it, but parties claim that they have it and apply it in each and every situation, educating people in that way. And obviously this podcast is kind of a counterweight to that, because it is purely technocratic and does not consider those fictional ideas of left and right and everything in between it. This makes political parties, extremely dangerous in political education, and technically seen, they should not be allowed to do that or even be existent. Another very important point in my book. If you want to read more about that, I would highly recommend you to order the book, but also check out esida.com, because I have a couple of very interesting articles about the divide of left and right. And actually, there was also the other day an episode on this topic. But political parties, as I said, they are not very good educators. The school, in that sense, is also not often a very effective educator in political terms. So if you learn politics at school, you also have to think about the everyday dynamics of school systems, and this is the case in each and every school system that we have on this planet. Teacher comes to class in the morning, might have a bad day, might not be at some point that attached to the topic of political education or political topics altogether, or might even have a certain preference and tries to kind of project that onto the children. What I want to say is, because of the mass of teachers that we have in each and every political system, the contingency that these, or kind of the control of the integrity of those teachers, is very important, is very difficult, and therefore very important. Because you cannot account or be 100% sure that they're going to objectively and in a very comprehensive and engaging manner going to explain political systems to children, there you already lose some kind of momentum and performance in educating people on politics, which I think is very important, since at that age you will need to have an understanding of why certain things are done in those specific ways. For example, why do we vote? There is this huge misconception that voting is some sort of obligation that you just do just so you have done your obligation, but is not a thoughtful process that needs updating and continuous learning throughout the whole period until you are able to cast your next vote. It is more like we'll figure it out like 2 months before the election, or even 1 month, or even 1 day before the election. Read a couple of things, make up our minds, and make the voting decision when we are with our voting paper in front of the box, and basically throw it in. And this is not the case, and often political discourse is centered around this campaigning in democratic systems, where I think this is just a huge manipulation scam, if you will, because political parties spend a lot of money during the campaigning phase of elections, and basically are not very interested in educating and people throughout the whole period of their presidency, or if it's a prime minister, that the prime minister's office want to educate people throughout the whole term, and it's just being present and prominent during the time of election. Very flawed situation. And this is something that actually also comes from the school system, where this is often treated, and I'm taking European countries as well as Turkey for an example, where I could have, where I observed that this is the way politics is approached. So there we already have like two flawed aspects of political education. The next step would be university education, and obviously this is a voluntary approach. Nobody is obliged to enroll for a university. But once you do, political education at universities becomes more effective than anywhere else, comparatively. The reason for that is that this is the only place where politics is truly or closest to being treated as a scientific field, or something that is not so much exposed to opinions as we practically do in everyday life. If you think about discourse and dialogues that you had with your friends and family, most often you would hear "I think," "I believe," and this and that. I mean, it's very opinionated, and people usually in political discussions, and this is extremely interesting actually, is that they do not want to truly discuss certain things and exchange ideas and develop their ideas over this verbal exchange, but they rather want to prove their point and kind of dominate the other person with basically saying that they are right and explaining to them why they are right. It is not approached in a technocratic and not in a technical way, in the sense that we look at certain metrics and say, okay, well, we can apply these and these tools in order to craft this and this solution or idea. And here, dialogue becomes, in such a situation, very fruitful. And this is the case at university level, or often. I don't want to generalize it, but here we actually start to learn how we apply different concepts, such as liberalism, realism, what about Marxism, what about capitalism, all those isms. Basically, you learn there and learn to apply them. You learn to detach yourself from the emotional aspect that might invoke, that those terms might invoke in everyday life for the layman, and we use it in political science terms as very useful concepts to make sense of certain phenomena and developments. So that was very abstract. I can give you an example. So, for example, there's a war, and in this war there are many different. This is not a classical war of country A and country B fighting against each other in a field, but let's suppose we have a war where 7 parties are kind of involved. There are no clear allies. There are many different fractions. They're fighting over a certain territory, but then again, it's not very territory oriented, but ideology based, because they have all different views and cultural cores, and so on and so forth. So it's a mess, and it kind of sounds like the war in Syria. And people have problems making sense of that without the necessary tools. But at university level, we have the tools, such as saying, well, there is a power political element in there, where geopolitical and energy considerations basically play a role. And these concepts inform the actions of actors A, B, and C towards actors E and F, for example. And by doing that and dismantling and exposing those different kind of connections and dynamics, one by one, and then putting them together, the puzzle becomes clear, and then we have an analytical ground to say, well, this is the situation, and based on that situation and based on the different objectives that those involved actors have, we can craft this and that policy solution. It's a very straightforward way, without judging, without actually going into the discussion of who's right and who's wrong. And because that is the case, this makes university level learning of politics very, very interesting. Sad thing about it is that this is solely confined to university level, and not in every country this is done in a good way. And here we have a big problem, because, and Then we come to the second stream of thought in terms of political education, and that is that flawed political education can lead to much damage in the political system because people are manipulated and they're not well enough equipped to kind of deal with all those aspects that I just mentioned. And because of that, they're overwhelmed, they're making wrong voting decisions, they are not very interested in, or they have a wrong idea about how the country needs to develop, and then certainly such a society moves into decline. Once that happens, it's a goodbye situation. So basically, to wrap this second stream's, or to summarize this view, is if you cannot centralize and control political education and be very specific and clear about it, it's growing rampant. And once that happens, you cannot control the societal decline that comes with it, because from each and every side and on each and every level where you have political education, different inputs reach different people without being ever so effective that all those different inputs could actually, as a result in those people, work for an efficient outcome in the end. Meaning, those with better access to or with more interest in political topics and concepts, they have a big advantage and they have better access to certain tools and to certain analytical fields than others. However, those who are educated on an emotional level, they have the opportunity to kind of mobilize their opinion on an emotional argument while being technically so incorrect that this is going to harm the country. So we have many populist movements that actually make use of political education in that sense. They claim to be educating people on politics, but in the end they're just throwing in some populist statements. And for example, this is the best statement ever: taxes mean that the government is robbing us. The government robs us through taxes. This is clear-cut populism, because here you're implying so many things without saying anything about that. There's no empirical evidence, there's no analytical framework, there's nothing that will substantiate this claim on any logical and cognitively sustainable level, but people would like that statement and follow the statement because it some kind of appeals to their emotions, and they think the logical consequence of that statement is that the person who says it is going to lower the taxes, and this is the only thing that people care about. And if they're not politically educated well enough to understand that at certain periods higher taxes and at certain period lower taxes, and the distribution of taxes, the form of taxes, the nature of taxes, and all kind of other taxation schemes of foreigners and businesses, and so on and so forth, how they interplay. If they don't know about it, this statement sounds very sweet. It's an easy way out, and therefore people are likely to follow this view and people who say statements like that. And this is a valid point and also a valid disadvantage. So what does that mean? We have the stream that says we need political education, and it is good that it is decentralized, because then you are not kind of putting boundaries to all those ways that people might think in the discourses and on different levels. But on the other side, the opposition says it needs to be centralized, it needs to be controlled, and we might keep people better out of the process of political education than miseducating them. Both are valid, both have very clear advantages and disadvantages. And I tend to support the first. I think it is better to leave room for flawed opinion based policy thinking, which I, as a technocrat, I'm a pure technocrat, personally do not like that very much, but I acknowledge that it is better that people have some kind of flawed idea or not or incomplete ideas about the world of politics, and kind of think also in different directions, which is still an organic process, than to shut everything down and suppress all the good voices and all the innovations that might arise from all the discourses and the educational processes. So even though personally I would say, how can you allow for such inefficiencies to happen? They are necessary in the end. However, we need to be aware that political education is important, and states need to be more ambitious in educating their societies in a fair way. And this is very, very important, because I have observed that many countries actually try to push their society into one direction, and then the regime changes and it's the other direction. Systematically, the almost sick obsession with promoting democratic systems is another perversion that actually in technocratic terms is very unwarranted. And all these things are very important to consider when building up systems of political education. And in that context, I do believe that politicians and political professionals within those political systems themselves need better education. What we today lack at university level is the detachment from certain concepts. We are still very emotionally attached to those strong words of freedom. When we hear freedom, it sounds so sweet. It invokes the emotion of we are going to tear everyone apart who is not going to give us our freedom, which is the exact opposite of freedom in essence. And in academics, it is kind of the case that all those terms of democracy and freedom, everything sounds so sweet and so romantic, that there too we have some sort of bias and cannot approach things in an objective and kind of neutral state of mind. So this is the first thing, and I think professionals need to detach themselves a lot from concepts and from ideas and ideologies. This is very important. What they do need to, the only emotional tie that politicians should have is towards the nation, which is obviously inherently tied to the society. So there should be a strong emotional commitment to the nation and to the society, to the good of society, but not to concepts and not to ideologies, because they might not work in every context, and politicians need to know that. And once that is the case, once the elites have reached that point, they can implement sensible and meaningful systems of how we can neutrally and fairly educate people. It can also be the other way around, a bottom-up approach, but this is, as I said, far more difficult, because you have all those little actors within those education processes that kind of spray their own opinion into it in everyday life situations, which kind of leaves a mark, and this actually develops into a certain view. So it is important that we at some point craft meaningful frameworks where the integrity of those who kind of transmit the information is also checked. It needs to be centered around the emotionless transfer of technical knowledge, because, and this is something that I will always defend, politics has nothing to do with opinions. Politics has nothing to do with ideologies. Ideas, yes. Ideas in the sense of, hey, let's make it this and that way. Maybe this administrative system works better than that. That's fine. Maybe this tax policy is better than that at this point. These are all ideas. These are all ways of thinking in certain situations. But having an opinion on policy making and saying high taxes are always bad, low taxes are always bad, is not going to work. And it's not even not going to work, but it is not working. This is not how politics should be done. And therefore, we need more political education. As a wrap-up, summarizing it, we need more political education. We need more comprehensive political education. We need to implement more levels of political education. We also have to take into account that, we need to detach our personalities and then our emotional ties to certain situations and views in that case, and we need to institutionalize this neutrality and objectivity towards political matters. So a very interesting topic, I have to say, and I would like to reflect on that a little bit, because this podcast is actually one of those added levels of political education. And I really hope that this fairness that I'm talking about here right now, that I can also offer to you. I hope that when you listen to this podcast, that you do not have the feeling that I want to push you into a certain direction. I don't want to have a direction, actually. I want to be technocratic. I want to look at the things as they are and find the most efficient and effective solution to them. I hope that I'm able to do that. And this is certainly what I stand for. I want this content to be informative and empowering, in the sense that you get all the tools and all the tools that you need in your toolkit in order to analyze and deal with political topics. So I really hope I can do that. I really hope that I can provide you with all these things. And if not, and if there's anything to improve, please let me know, because I think it is something new that I'm trying to do here with this podcast and this magazine all together. I want to be fair. I want to be technocratic. I want to move away from basically thinking in categories and be efficient and fair about it. So if that is the case, please leave a like and share this video also, or this episode if you're listening to it on a podcasting platform. Obviously, I would be happy about your comments and emails and feedback in general. And finally, I hope that you liked this episode. Until next time, I enjoyed it very much, and take care and bye.